podcast. Thank you for joining us live. This is where you get practical, no BS insights on how to grow yourself and grow your career. On this episode, we are talking to my friend Ryan Paul Gibson. Welcome, Ryan. Thank you so much for joining us. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, I'll try with the no BS. We'll see. I'll keep it like PG-13
Okay.
BS. How does that sound?
Sounds good.
So I've been a marketer by trade in B2B for over 20 years. I took a small hiatus to become a reporter, TV and radio for a few years, and went back to the business world. And right now, I sort of wear two hats. My main hat is I run Content Lift, and we do customer buyer research for marketing and sales teams for B2B organizations. And I'm also running the content team for a short time at a company called Rewind. They're a software company up here in Canada, where I'm from, Ottawa, Canada.
Fantastic.
So yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
Well, it sounds great, eh, Mr.
Yeah, it only took a few seconds. Very good.
Well, let's start a little bit about, so the title of our show is, strategizing your next move in your career. And that's such a valuable thing to do. And I really like to do that by you telling your story, because I find that the way that you worked through strategizing your next moves in your story in your career really helps provide a framework for some people. So let's start by just going a quick A to B story, how did you get to where you're at in your career? A little bit of a longer version.
We only have an hour right now.
Yeah.
But where I started, I like a lot of people. I probably did after high school. We did university up here in Canada. Same thing as college. Took business, specialty in hospitality, and that's what my family had worked in for years. I'd started working in hospitality when I was really young in my family's restaurants. I'm like, there's my thing. Mm-hmm. That's my career. Because it's just I had a very myopic view of it. So, but I worked in a lot of really cool environments as someone who worked in hospitality for the first few years. All sorts of restaurants, bars, what have you. And then my first real legit adult job outside of the service industry was still in it, but I was working for a franchise company, and I became their director of operations and marketing. And the reality was they wanted someone who was junior at a third of the price of a senior to sort of just figure it out as they went. I was like, that's me. So there was a lot of benefits to that. There was a lot that sucked about that. But what I really gravitated towards was the marketing side of things, rather than the operational side, which was what my strength was at the time. And that started my marketing career. I did that for a few years. I burned out of that industry when I hit about 30. And it's interesting. I don't know if maybe it's partly that. And I think back then there was a term called the quarter life crisis. I don't know if they still talk about that in job seeking circles. But that was sort of you get to that point of late 20s, early 30s, and is this my thing? Is this my life now? Is this all that there is? And there's probably a bit of that. And there's a whole host of other things we'll probably talk about. So I switched gears. I figured out I wanted to try something new, and that was broadcasting. Went back to school, took that at a community college, and got hired into the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, CBC. That's sort of like NPR, BBC. Corporations, broadcast corporation. Did that for 3 years, and I started getting that itch again. I was like, "Is this the thing? I don't know if this is the thing. Maybe I should just stay." I wasn't working full time. My wife got pregnant, and I was like, "Okay, now I need money." So I went back to the business world, but then I worked for a nonprofit. There was a / incubator, economic development agency, and working with sort of traditional Main Street type businesses, restaurants and so forth. And I was there first. I started off as their PR person because I was able to figure out how to transition there. And then I worked my way up to their marketing strategist. I was running a lot of their campaigns. And again, I was getting the itch. And then I was like, okay. So I went and ran marketing for a software company. And that went okay. Some things went well, some things did not go well. And then, but towards the end, I was like, maybe I want to work for me. Maybe that's the thing. And that's how I started off doing that. And then about 2 years ago, Content Lift was born. and we can talk a bit about that. And so that's where I am now. And I'm, like I said, I'm still working part-time for software companies now, helping them do stuff that I really like. Like I figured out the stuff like, okay, this is where my superpowers are, like my skill sets are. So I just focus on that, because for a while I thought I was going to be I wanted to be the next CMO. And then I've quickly
Ooh.
realized that is not the thing I want to be. And there's a lot
Mm.
of reasons for that. So that's sort of me from A to B. Is that sort of what you're looking for? I hope that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there was something so interesting about, as you were nearing the end of talking about your journey, is you found the things that you were really, really good at, that you loved doing. And I feel like, and also that point about how you didn't want to be a CMO. I feel like there's this idea in the business world in general that
Yeah.
you always have to be ascending some sort of ladder.
Oh
And,
yeah.
there are some people that aren't good people leaders, and that's not what they want to do. And I love that you took control of that aspect of your career and really decided to be intentional about what is it that I'm really good at, that I enjoy, that I know that I can do well for others and for myself. I
I
think that's,
think, if I may, I think
yeah.
a big mistake that I made is that you think there's just one or two paths. But
Hmm.
what I've realized, I think, in the last few years, just there's so many ways that you can approach your career.
Hmm.
And I think we limit ourselves in our thinking early on for probably a whole host of reasons that you probably know more better than I. But my mind has really expanded in the last 5 years about like what is possible with the rest of my career.
Yeah, I think in this, post-COVID era, people are really thinking very differently about how to support themselves economically and the difference
Yeah.
between a job and a career. And so how do you know when it's time for you to move on? When do you
Oh,
know that? Tell us some ways that you knew when you needed to move on from jobs.
yeah. I can walk it through like the historical context. I can still sort of remember those things, right?
Yeah,
So when I
yeah.
was at the franchise company, it was Treats, and I was like director of operations, director of marketing. And I started to really, how I describe it to people is I became like poisonous. I was just
Ooh.
because I was unhappy. I was upset. I was depressed. I was miserable with like where I was in my life, and that just bled into the ability for my colleagues to get their work done, and that was not fair to them,
Hmm.
right? Which is a very dramatic statement, I think, right? But that was like a key sign for me. It was like I'm now starting to impact other people's ability who really want to be there in earnest,
Hmm.
and that's not fair to them. So that was like a key thing for me. And that's happened other points of my career where I just feel like I want to contribute in a certain way, and I'm hitting a wall and I'm getting unhappy, and
Hmm.
then I'm now in fact affecting the performance of others, right? So that was
Hmm.
like that's one way that I know. um, the other one is, is my energy getting detracted as opposed to is my energy getting filled up, right? And
Oh,
I
wow.
think lots of people talk about that in different ways.
Hmm.
So I look for things that if it's some things in business you just sort of have to do, right? Like
Yes.
I am not good at a lot of administrative tasks,
Hmm.
but as someone who leads teams and I runs my own business, I have to do a lot of that.
Hmm.
But the trade-off of that versus the energy I get from working on the projects and things that I really have passion for, it's the trade-off is beneficial to me. I hope did I explain that okay? Because it's almost like
Yes.
the battery's getting, it's like you're recharging your battery in a way that's positive for you.
Yeah,
That's
I would say, like, it's kind of the difference between, when you eat a calorie dense meal that is nourishing to you versus a calorie dense meal that's not. You're
yeah,
eating candy and you just feel empty, and then you eat, something that feels really nourishing. And,
yeah.
usually after you eat, sugar, there's a crash. So it's kind of like that same idea. It's like, is it giving you energy or is it taking from you? And I think that's just such a valuable point. The other thing that I think is so interesting about what you've said is that there's a level of brutal honesty, and we had a comment from Elizabeth that said, brutally honest, thank you for that. And I love that you had a level of awareness in knowing that you were, contributing negatively to a system, and were able to really keep that at the forefront and understand that you wanted to be contributing positively to
Yeah.
systems. And so talk a little bit more about that. That's such an interesting point. How did you know that?
A few ways, right? One of the ways that I always remember it for me maybe my colleagues remember it different, but I've been in meetings and people have ideas and I'm just like complaining almost verbally about the ideas. Because it's either like I want to do something different or I'm not happy with like what my part is in the idea. And like what a garbage way to approach someone else's like work that they've put together, right? Like for me, like I'm almost vocalizing my disdain for like their ideas. Horrible way
Mhm,
to work.
mhm.
So it's like that's a really apparent way, but then or like a real prevalent way, obvious way.
Yeah.
But I think in other ways, it was like I didn't want to contribute into projects, or I wouldn't work on ideas. Like I wouldn't work on those ideas as with as much effort as I could have brought to the table from my colleagues. You
Mm,
know, I wouldn't join team outings or whatever. Right?
mhm,
Say no to meetings. Just my energy was not being put towards moving the projects or whatever goals they had forward.
mm.
Um, if you're at the end of the day, you feel like I've left that place and it's taken something from me, you
Wow.
know,
Yeah.
that's how I look at it. And it may be a simplistic way to look at it because there's probably a lot more going on than just like it's me not liking the work.
Mhm.
But at the end of the day, that's like a key flag for me, where if I'm not contributing positively to other people's work and it's coming out either in my actions or my dialogue or my energy,
Mhm.
then I need to really think about like, is this the place for me, or am I doing the work that I want to do? That's
Mm.
different than it being hard, right? Like I
Yeah.
run my own business. That's hard and stressful.
Mhm.
But one of the things is you hear entrepreneurs talk about, or other leaders, is like the concept of choose your hard.
Yes. Oh,
So
that's such a good concept. Say more.
yeah, like so I like running my own business now. I've realized that it's very stressful. There's a lot of anxiety, but I'm choosing that because I can live with that, and it doesn't take away from me. It actually it it gives me more energy to be creative and problem solve and so on, right?
Mhm, mhm.
Whereas other people, that just might be something that detracts for them, and I've seen that in entrepreneurs, having worked with like hundreds now, where they have this dream of, well, this is how it should be, right? Like for me, the dream was I'm going to be a CMO, so I got to stay here and do this work so I can be the CMO one day. And I'm like, that was just the wrong mindset. Entrepreneurs sometimes are like, well, I want to have that $1 million, $1 billion company, so I have to keep doing this.
Mhm.
But you have to ask yourself at some point, is it worth it? And
Hmm.
is this the path for me?
Right.
So that's how I sort of look at these things, is, if I can choose the hard that I can live with and doesn't detract from my energy, then that's probably the path. And I want to keep working on the problems
Mhm.
in a positive way. That's probably part of the path for me. I hope
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Yes, I think it absolutely makes sense. To me, it really speaks to this idea of efficiency.
Yeah.
You're realizing you want to be efficient in your energy and efficient in the way that you do life, and something that takes away from your energy, obviously is going to affect other parts of your life. And I think that's it's a great level of self-awareness. So let's talk about how you were strategic in some of these
Yeah.
ways about your next move. I think that's just so important because I love the way that it's part of how you think with customer research, but also part of how you just think in your life in
Yeah.
general. So, what were some of the things that you took into consideration when you were strategizing these next moves?
Yeah. When it was the early days, when I went back to school for broadcasting, that was pretty easy
Hmm.
because the strategy was, God, I'm miserable and depressed, and I just want to pull the ripcord and like get out, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Whether that was the right choice or not, but that was like the easiest way I could think about it at the time.
right.
But what I did at least was, okay, well, what have I always liked? And when I was going through the things I enjoyed and I was looking around at the landscape of skills, I was like, well, I always liked media. I was always reading the paper, listening to the radio, consuming TV. We didn't have the internet really to the extent when I was growing up. I'm
Yeah.
dating myself. But that was something that always, again, filled me with energy. I had curiosity. I wanted to learn more. So I still wasn't sure like what path in that was I was going to take.
Hmm.
So I just chose that one. I was like, okay, I'm going to choose broadcasting. There was a radio program here in Ottawa. Um, and I'm really glad I did it. I don't work in that industry anymore, but it gave me so much. It gave me a ton of new skill sets. It's where I met my wife. So I got a lot out of it, but it it gave me at least a way. I leaned into something that gave me joy personally, and just explored that. I didn't have enough sense yet to figure out how to really drill it down into that, and I'll talk about that in a sec. But at least I started somewhere.
Right.
And then, so when I was working at CBC, and it was a fun job, but it really wasn't my calling. I wasn't going to be the next massive reporter. Like investigative journalist that is on NBC News. And for me to get anywhere, I probably would have had to move somewhere, relocate. I didn't want to do that. My wife and I were about to have a baby. So I was like, I don't want to upend my family. She's trying to get her career going here. So that's where I was like, you pull out sort of the whiteboard. You're like, okay, what can I do with these skills?
Right.
And then what most reporters do traditionally is they move to public relations. So this would have been now, I'm getting into about almost a decade ago.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, well, I could do that. Maybe I could do this. I could try this. I was already trying to work with agencies at the time. So I was working with a few creative agencies and video because I'd sort of still had some creative passions there. So I was like, okay, well, I can still maybe get into marketing if I do PR. Like I was just sketching out like what is possible.
Right.
And I was just like skill sets mapping to a job.
Yeah.
So then I saw the job for PR come up at Invest Ottawa. I applied. I'd actually interviewed the CEO once as a reporter. So I emailed them like, hey, remember me? He's like, you're hiring a PR person. They're like, oh, great. Here, talk to the vice president of marketing. And I got the job. Right. And from there, it really launched my career because my network exploded. I started working with, dozens and dozens of early stage entrepreneurs in software, coaching them in communication, PR, and so on. And then I started, okay, I'm hitting sort of my wall here. That whole, like, I'm getting to be that vitriolic person, is starting to creep in again. What can I do? Yeah. I'm like, okay, well, again, skill sets. What do I want to be? I want to be a CMO. Yeah, that sounds good because that's what I'm supposed to be next. Because we talked about like that ladder you think you're supposed to climb. I'm going to do that. So I went and ran marketing for a software company, reporting to the CEO. Did some stuff well. I'm like, did a lot of things not so well, and a lot of stuff I did not like. And that ran its course very quickly because I just was in that environment. I was just like reaching, like it wasn't for me. So then I was like, now we're getting to like the final way I think about these things is I looked at, okay, what do I want? Okay, here's what I want. I want to control my time. I want to have a high level of impact with either colleagues or clients or peers. I want I want to be able to impact strategy. I want X, I want Y, right? The skills are still there, but now the skills were not how I was using as a framework for like finding the next thing. I was looking at wants and needs because the skills can be applied in all sorts of ways, right? What I care about more now is how am I defining what's important to me? So after I I did the scorecard, I said, I think I'm going to work for me and see like, and what am I willing to live with? Right. I'm willing to live with like, might not be able to pay mortgage next month. Okay. I can live with that. Right. Like it, and some people cannot deal with that type of anxiety. I'm okay with that. Right. Because it's just where the heart I've chosen. So I've whiteboarded all that out. And then I said, okay, I'm work for me. And now I've designed my life around that. But I still had this ability where, okay, I can still work part-time for companies to bring in some revenue. So I still want to be involved in software companies, see what they're doing, how they're growing their businesses, right? And then take those learnings and apply those to my clients. So I hope that was a long answer. I'm sorry, but I wanted to show you the progression of how I thought about these things, where first it's just sort of like, where is my life supposed to go? Okay, I'll be a journalist. And then I'm still boxing myself in. And then as I move to the next thing, well, what skills do I want? Can I apply and what can I learn? Okay, but I want to be a CMO. I'm still sort of limiting my thinking. Now I'm like, what do I care about in my life? And then how can I map that against things that I can try and do? Now, I'm not saying any of this is easy. And it's been a 20-year journey for me. there's probably longer than most people want to do it. But if I can give anyone anything, it's like try to think in that final end state of like, what do I want? And then work backwards from there. Thanks, Elizabeth. I appreciate that.
I'm glad. Thanks. Yeah, thanks so much, Elizabeth. I want to say what I'm hearing from you, and what I think is so exciting to me personally, is that first you talked about, instead of thinking, inside of the box that everybody else has given you in terms of how your career should progress, you thought in terms of a framework of skill sets.
Yeah.
What are my skill sets, and how can I apply them in different ways? And for me, that resonates because, I started off my career as an artist, and transitioning into the corporate world, I was like, I have so much creativity. How can I use that?
Yeah.
And I started to learn that business is an incredibly creative field.
Yep.
It's the same as painting, only the materials you're using is people and relationships. And so you get to grow and paint a different picture for yourself with each business that you join. And that's what's compelling to me. What I loved about what you talked about is you talked about, understanding that you have XYZ skill sets. What do I want to get out of these skill sets?
Yeah.
And how can these be applied in a way that nourishes me and brings joy and energy to me? And I love the idea that you are enjoying learning through your business, and then you can apply those learnings to other places in your life. Could you talk a little bit more about sort of the what ifs, from personal experience? So, what are the first couple of things that you recommend someone should do if they want to be intentional about their next career move based on your experience?
Yeah, I think it comes down to like understanding, trying to figure out like what you want out of your life, which is such a heavy concept and hard to get right. But that's okay. That's not the point. The point is like progress towards it. Right. Because it's always you're always incrementally improving it. I feel much more confident now. I say I'm in like the back nine of my career. Because I am literally like where I am in my career now, but I feel more confident about the choices I make in how I want to approach things. That came over time, but if you can at least start thinking about that first part,
right.
I think that's important. Because let's take your example. I love creative work. There's so many things you can do in that, and as an artist, what do you have to think about is the trade-offs. As an artist, your scope of creative options are endless. In the business world, they're limited, but there's still the ability to be creative, right? And an agency working with a big Fortune 500 brand, consumer brand, you'll have more creativity than a small software company that's like selling to IT people, right? You still get creativity there, but even within that, there's spectrums. So it's sort of like, but creativity for me is paramount, right? For me, it's what's important to me is control of my time. That's like the number one thing for me, because the more time I have, the more time I have with my family for things I want to pursue, right? So you start there. And then it's like, okay, well, now what am I good at? What are my skills, and how can I transfer around? And that's, I started the other way historically, but now I like to flip it because, like, as I said, skills can be applied in all sorts of ways. So I wonder, like, what do I care? What am I passionate about? What do I care about? Passion still, we'll talk about that, because I think you sent me a question about like, what is some bad advice? I think passions can be a bit of a sticky wicket, but we'll get there. But at least, like, what do I want to put energy into? Where do I want to spend my time?
Right.
And then what do I want out of my career and life? Then you work on skill sets, and then just map that out and find ways, and then talk to people. That was the last thing I did. So before I went to broadcasting, I knew the person who ran the program. I knew a few people in radio. I went and talked to them, right? I've been talking before. I tried to run. I bounced from the nonprofit back to private sector, running software marketing teams. I talked to marketers and VPs of marketing, and like, how do you do your thing, and what does your job look like, and so on and so on, right? Because if you just jump in blind, it could be a mistake, right? Or it could be just not a mistake, not aligned with what you're you're hoping to get out of it, or you've preconceived notions or misconceptions about what that work is. So talk to people. Those are three things piece of advice I give people.
I think those are so great. So, the first one you said was, gather your skill sets. The second one you said was, I can't remember what the second one was, but
figure like what you want in your career.
Right.
List out your skill sets and then go talk to people.
I think that's so great, and I love that you made that correction about the word mistake. I think we think when we go into a certain field and we find out it's not for us, we tend to. I don't know about you, but I know historically I've tend to shame myself, like, oh yeah, I can't believe I made this mistake or whatever, and it's like
I would have too. Yep.
Yeah,
but not anymore, because it's just it's not pointless, but it's like it doesn't help you to dwell on that, because everything is a learning opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm a parent. You think I knew how to be a parent when the babies showed up? Oh my gosh, I'm still barely a good one. My wife is the one I have to learn from.
Right.
But I'm better now
Mm-hmm.
than I was before. So anything in life is like that. You're never going to have a full grasp of the beginning. So you have to sort of have grace with yourself about some of the choices you make.
You're totally right. You have to have that level of grace with yourself. And I think I like that there's a lot of places in your story where you talk about following your curiosity.
Yeah.
So you're not 100% sure that XYZ is the right path, and what does that even mean anyways, but you really took time to follow your curiosity towards developing specific skill sets. And I think they say, or I think it was Steve Jobs that said, you can only connect the dots going backwards. And I love that you're understanding that you're just taking that next step, connecting that next dot, and then as you look back, you can see where you've come from.
Yeah, absolutely. That's actually sort of what I do now in my work as a customer researcher. And hindsight is like, that's the cliche, right? Hindsight is 2020.
Mm-hmm.
But you can still learn from that, because what you'll see is patterns. Right. Another piece of advice too is talk to your friends and family. Like, what do they notice about you?
Mm-hmm.
And like, what are the things that you talk about that you seem energetic about, you seem to speak with pride, with appreciation, like when you're talking about the things you do in your career or the passions you have, because sometimes you're inside your own head and you can't see the forest for the trees. So it's often someone's getting that third party objective opinion about like what they see, or people asking you really good questions about, well, have you thought of this? Have you thought of that? It helps that helps you sort of go back in time and connect those dots a little more succinctly and say, you know what, those things are consistent in my life. And that's probably something I want to keep exploring.
Yeah, I love the idea of reflecting with people that are close to you. You're right. There's times when you really can't. It's hard for us to see our own character and what really builds us up and lights us up. And I think having others reflect on that with you is just so valuable. So we're nearing the end of our time here.
Oh wow, okay.
Yeah. So we do a short half-hour show, but I would love to. We're going to close off with some rapid fire questions that I think people are really going to love. So the first question is, what is the most random job that you have ever had?
Yeah, you sent these two to me ahead of time. Thank you, because I'm so bad at these. I was thinking about it. I think the most random job I ever had was when I was working as a server. I was working as a server. I got a private gig to serve a 10-course meal at a hunting lodge in Quebec for a world-renowned chef who imported game from around the world. So it was his 50th birthday, and it took 4.5 hours to serve the meal.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it was. We even had at one point, they had like we had like this special alcohol that was imported. It was like a liqueur, and they put in little like mini martini glasses, and they took a blowtorch and lit them all on fire. And they sent us in with like laser light shows to like bring the fire. Like, I'm carrying a plate of fire around. That was fun. That was like a random job. It was a fun one, but it was totally random.
I love that. That's such an exciting job. I feel like I would get blinded and just be terrified. Like I'm blind and I'm carrying fire. This is
well, you roll with it, right?
Right. Okay, so the last rapid fire question that I love to ask is, what is the worst career advice that you have ever gotten?
So this I foreshadowed this, the passion one,
Hmm.
because I think you have to be very careful with that. Sometimes your passions should be something that are not revenue driven, because they give you something in your life
Right.
that goes beyond like your career.
Mm.
So if I love woodworking, I love making wood frames for pictures. You don't have to turn that into a side hustle. Like you just don't.
Thank you. Yes.
You can just keep doing that, right? I am of my personal ways. I like to combine a lot of those things because I that's just how my brain works, right?
Mhm.
Like 24/7. I like sort of the the mosaic of my passions alongside
Mhm.
that's alongside my things. That said, it's like there are things like if I could return back the clock, I would probably study dance, which sounds crazy.
Yeah, that's
Uh,
interesting. Okay. Wow.
but
You still
I
got time, man.
yeah, that's what I say. Like, but see, um, like that's not going to be a side hustle for me.
Right,
Like, if I
right.
ever decided to keep continue doing that, like I do acting on the side,
Mhm.
here and there. Like, that's not the thing that's going to be. That just gives me joy,
Mhm. Mhm.
right? So I think you have to really be careful about like, is this something that just speaks to my identity and gives me joy, or something I really can put some energy in, and that can be my career. Like,
Mhm.
it's not an easy thing to answer, but
Mhm.
that whole like align your passions with money. I think you want to be very careful about that.
Mm, yes. Yes. I think that's such a valuable piece of advice. And what really stands out to me about that is, we have this idea that I have this skill set. It's not valuable unless I turn it into money. And
Yeah,
that's just not true because, like you
it's
said,
not.
it adds something to your life. It brings you joy, and that brings you value in a different way. And
Yeah,
yeah,
I agree.
I'll fall victim to that all the time. Like, oh, this is a cool, fun, like thing that I love doing. Why don't I turn it into money? And it's like, I don't always need to do that.
You don't, and that's again, it's not an easy thing to answer,
Mhm.
but it's something worth thinking about.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining us. And everyone out there who joined us, thank you so much as well. If you want to listen to this podcast again, it goes live on all relevant podcasting sites on Monday. And don't forget to like and subscribe. And you can also send this to someone, a friend of yours, if you feel like this advice was valuable and served you in some way. So thank you so much for joining us. And we will see you next Thursday live for our show at 8:30 a.m. Central Standard Time. Bye bye.